into the AMA. So, hi everyone, thank you so much for being here to a very special AMA with Justin Truman. So, some information about him: he studied computer science at Carnegie Mellon, and as many of you here tonight will want to do, landed a job as a gameplay programmer at Pandemic Studios, and is now Chief Development Officer at Bungie. So, at Bungie, he developed Destiny 2 and was a lead engineer for Halo. Both two games you've definitely heard of, unless you live under a rock, especially Halo. Like, oh my gosh. So Destiny 2 Season 19 shipped this week. So if you go to the subreddit, you can see that it's like the logo everywhere. And the entire Destiny player base is like laser focused on this AMA. So looking for clues or criticism. So that's kind of cool. And for those that don't know me, I'm Claire. I'm a high school senior from Boston and LA. And I'm really hoping to learn more about the game design industry, both in terms of like technical and design and management. This summer, actually, I was working on Steinwriter. If some of you guys have been checking announcements, it's a game about math, love, and graphing with some other people in Hack Club, and we're hoping to launch soon. So yes, Chris. And before we get started, I thought it'd be really funny to start with some history about like game dev. So here's some information about the history of gaming. It's actually been a part of coding since the very, very beginning. And at the 1940s World Fair, thousands of people lined up to play the first video game. It was an ancient mathematical game of strategy called NIM. If you watch Matt Parker on YouTube, he has a whole breakdown on the logic behind NIM. It's like actually my really coolest study. And most people actually beat the computer because it was 1940. And games for the next 30 years, such as like tennis and whatever, were created at various like government labs. Actually, for example, the Brookhaven National Lab in Long Island, which is really cool because just imagine a bunch of government people designing video games. That's really cool to me. And anyways, also just to introduce Hack Club to Justin, Hack Club is a global community of high school hackers with thousands of clubs and hackathons started by its members every year. We have a very active Slack community, which is where we sent this puzzle hunt. And because many of us are gamers or are programmers very excited and interested in the concept of an MMORPG with an API and some amazing technical and world building background. Like I was opening the Destiny wiki and there was like 9,000 pages. That requires some serious world building. It was really fun. I got into a whole rabbit hole about it with Max. And since we are a global community, some of us are actually not able to be online right now. For example, like we heard that Car is like awake at 2 a.m. for this one. So I might add some questions at the end asked by people over text. So anyways, I want to start with one question for myself before we get open questions for everyone. Because I talked about how I've been really interested in both game design, development, and management. I was wondering, because you've done all of this and you've been in game dev for so long, do you still actually play video games? Like, do you enjoy them now that you've spent so long developing them, or do you like overanalyze them? I'm really curious about that.
Oh yeah, I still play lots of video games. I still play too much. I mean, it's like right now I'm playing through God of War. I'm playing a ridiculous amount of Marvel Snap on my phone. Like whenever I've got 15 minutes, I'm like, oh, let me get a couple rounds in.
Nice.
It definitely, I mean, to me, it's like video games are still in this space a little bit. I think with your generation, this is finally not being the case, where it's almost like, do you play video games or not? But people don't ask like, do you watch movies? Or like, hey, do you ever read books? It's just kind of a part of the entertainment landscape that everyone engages in to their preference, right? And so I find I play different types of games than I work on now. Like I spend a lot of time on like I love more indie games and like short form narrative games and like open world survival games, which are different from the kind of stuff I build. But yeah, I try to play a little bit of everything. And then it changes your perspective as well once you've spent a long time. Like when I play something like God of War, I get to enjoy it twice, because I get to enjoy it as a player, playing a good experience, and then I get to enjoy it as a developer, just in awe of some of the stuff that they do and like knowing how hard it is to do what I just saw them experience. And so you get to kind of like get that craft respect as well as just enjoying it as any player would.
That's really cool. Yeah. So they have an insight into actual how a game works. Sounds like it really enhances the experience. Anyways, I'm not going to take too much of the time. I'm going to open up to the group. So remember to raise your hand on Zoom, and when called, can you say your name and say where you're from, or like grade in high school. Awesome. So does anyone have any questions?
Um,
Oh, yes, Kai.
Okay, so I guess my name's Kai, and I'm from San Jose, California. I'm currently a senior in high school, and I guess I want to start off this with a like fun question. Do you think 1 billion lines could be to one of each Pokemon?
1 billion lines could what?
Could beat one of each Pokemon?
1 billion lines?
Yeah, lions.
Oh, lions. Okay, sorry, lions. No, I feel like there's a few Pokemon that could on their own destroy millions of lions. I feel like the whole power structure for Pokemon doesn't really work if you don't think about it as a kid's game, because a bunch of them could like destroy continents and stuff. So
Yeah, but how come they haven't already? You gotta think about it that way.
what I wonder is, do humans in the world of Pokemon eat Pokemon as meat?
I
And
think
if
in
they
the anime,
don't, what do they eat as meat?
No.
Because I don't want them to, but it doesn't seem like it's a completely vegetarian society. So
I think they do.
is there
eat
some other
Pokemon as-
animal that's not Pokemon that they eat?
I mean, they do like hood, like what's it called? The lion Pokemon like Buffalant and Tauros and stuff.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's kind of okay. That's really sad. I just imagine Pikachu. Okay. Oh, by the way, can people turn on their cameras if you want, if you're comfortable with it, just so it feels more fun together. All right. Our next question is coming from Belle.
Hi, I'm Belle. I am currently in Vermont, and I would like to know, do you think that video games are a social good?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Like not even a question to me. I think if you imagine like people just playing games in isolation, single player only games, and then you layer on a bunch of like predatory monetization and impulse loops, like you could imagine a version of that that's not good for humanity. But I think what's actually happening is everything in gaming is becoming social, is becoming another way for people to connect with their friends. And I certainly felt like it was a great tool during COVID, during quarantine, to maintain connections with my friends, right? And I still find it useful for like folks that I know that are in other states or whatever. Sometimes it's like it's weird and awkward to be like, hey, you want to get on like a Zoom chat and just like talk to each other's faces for an hour? But it's much easier to be like, hey, you want to play that game for an hour, and then we'll just get a chance to catch up on each other's life. And so to me, a game world is like a mall or a restaurant or a coffee shop. It's another excuse for people to hang out that doesn't require physical proximity. And yeah, a big part of why I'm still doing it is because I get to see the stories too. Like we'll have people who will write letters to Bungie about like, I met my spouse in your video game, or like I was able to like make this core group of friends that had been like helped me through a dark depression in my life. And like I think a lot of those stories are real because games are just a way to plug humans together, you know.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
That's a really good point. I remember being able to stay in touch with some of my friends because I do like Discord screen shares and I just watch them play games. So yeah, definitely pandemic really required a lot of screen time. It was kind of concerning. Our next question comes from Car.
So hello, my name is halalboss. I'm from really far away Thessaloniki, Greece. So I'd like to ask you something really cliche. How did you get into making games or programming in general?
Yeah. So I was playing games for forever as a kid, like from when I was in like elementary school, and that was always kind of my like favorite hobby when I wasn't socializing with people. I didn't really understand at the time because there weren't like game design degrees and stuff like that, so I wasn't even sure how to get a job making video games, and certainly how to get a degree. And so I ended up going to computer science because I was like, well, I really like computers. And then it was towards the end of college that I remember there was a point I was walking around at a job fair with a stack of my resumes, and I walked in circles of the job fair for an hour and I didn't give anyone my resume. And then I had this like little bit of a breakdown where I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I not applying to any of these companies? And I was like, oh, because I don't want to work for just a software company. I want to make video games, and I don't even know how to do that. But it was like my realization that that's what I wanted to do. So then I switched and I only applied for like internships and jobs of trying to get a job in games. And I wasn't able to get an internship, but after I graduated, I was able to get a job as an entry-level engineer at Pandemic Studios. And then there's this kind of annoying thing about the games industry where there's this like big kind of like switch flip between not having any professional experience in games, and then it can feel really hard to like break in. But then the moment you've worked in games, it all of a sudden is really easy to get other jobs in games and to get callbacks and stuff. And so once I had gotten that first job, then everything kind of just flowed from there.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Did you initially want to do game development because you had played a lot of games and saw the impact it had on you, or was it because you also really liked, like, did you initially want to do some engineering technical things, or very much game design and understanding some of the world building of that?
Yeah, I was initially intimidated by design. Like I imagined I could do some version of that later, but I was a little like, I don't know if I'm smart enough to like design a game. And so early on, I was much more attracted to like the technical challenges around games. So I was really kind of obsessed with AI for a long time and really wanted to be an AI programmer. And like, so it was super interesting to me to see how other games AI worked. Like I remember one of the games that probably was like 30% of my inspiration to try and get into games myself was Black and White by Bullfrog, a game really, really old. None of you have probably played, but it's basically like this AI simulation where you like have a pet and you can teach it different things. But I was like, oh, I want to write an AI like that. And then it was after I got into games as a programmer that I started realizing how much I enjoyed the design side and how much of the ultimate player experience and whether someone enjoys your game is not just about the technical components, but also about how you present those to players. And then I started doing a mix of engineering and design.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I would have thought it was the other way around, but that's really cool to see.
Well, I was a huge nerd, so it was a lot easier for me to like imagine that I could understand a computer than imagine that I could understand like other people. So
very understandable, totally. Our next question comes from Jaden.
Hi, I'm Jaden. I am a sophomore in Maryland. My question for you is that, like, do you think players would be able to like earn money from a game itself? Like, for example, like completing quests or like an in-game economy?
Yeah, I mean, there's examples of that right now. Like there's like the Web3 games now where different currencies and stuff can be backed by some form of like cryptocurrency or something like that. And then there's like gray market examples of like gold farmers in different online games and stuff where whether it's officially allowed or unofficially allowed, you can get your assets out. Even Roblox has a decent number of ways in which you can make money. I think that like for me personally, creatively, I'm not super interested in that space because I feel like human motivations change a bunch when you add a like monetary component. I think like what you want is I'm just doing this thing for fun and I'm having fun and I also happen to make money doing it. But I think what usually happens is there are ways to play it that are less and less fun, but make more and more money. And you're incentivizing folks to move down that road. And then eventually you have a large portion of your population that's not actually having fun in your game. They're just using it as a monetization stream.
Okay, thank you.
Max, do you want to ask your question? Just like out loud.
Oh, I think it was kind of addressed. I was just commenting. Destiny kind of avoids that altogether by not like not only do you not have an in-game market, but I don't think there's a way for characters
Yep.
to trade items or anything.
Yeah.
Is that like an intentional choice? Like we don't want to create an economy?
Yeah, it's intentional. Like we're not trying to make any way to extract money back out of the game, because I think that can create degenerate behaviors. And then the other challenge is there's a whole bunch of security and fraud concerns is once you create even like an in-game trading economy.
So Destiny 2 has Destiny in general has like an API that allows people to make their own spin-off like apps and trading like and like market and everything. I was wondering what's like the thought process behind designing an API and allowing developers to have a place in this game where most other games don't really do that.
Yeah, we this I think was like a really inspired idea that some of our team making our original web and mobile tools had, which I think I don't want to 100% speak for them because there were a bunch of smarter people than me who made that decision. But I think a big part of it was the recognition that an open platform and an API can just build better tools than our team can build. And so we continue to support like our native app, but I think it's already been true where there's a lot of really cool tools that can get even through like volunteer support. Just can have better ideas than us and can crowdsource cooler content that then keeps the Destiny community happier.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's kind of part of what makes some like Reddit clients or Twitter clients almost better than the actual app itself. Yeah, like
exactly.
probably stochastic development is actually could be better. There's a question from someone who is not on the call because I think they're on a flight or something. Their question, which is from Devlos, is what is your opinion on the use of artificial intelligence in game development? You talked about how like you really want to get into AI, so that works a lot. And how do you think it can help to improve, for example, the storytelling and the coding aspects of the game?
Yeah, so when I was trying to get into AI, that was just an AI in the game of like an NPC or something. I think today AI is way more interesting. I was actually just talking to some folks yesterday about this at another studio, and we both agreed that I think AI is a tool that what it does is it accelerates what a human is capable of doing. And I think it's easy when we look at like these really high performance AI, like the like Chat GPT, if you played around with that at all, like recently, it's incredible. And if you think of Chat GPT as like another person, and like how smart is that person, and what happens when that person decides to like take over the internet or whatever, you can get all these like weird dystopian ideas. But I think if instead we view Chat GPT as a tool for us, like I'm trying to do things, and what happens if I now have this robot tool to help me, then I think it like accelerates a bunch of stuff that that isn't as interesting for me to do. Like I think about teams of developers as like you're hiring a bunch of really smart brains, and then you want to have them spend as much time as possible making really smart creative decisions. But then you look at an actual job, and a bunch of the job isn't actually that smart or creative a decision. It's like all this other stuff you have to do in between. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to have AI solve for more and more in that. So like you imagine someone localizing to another language and they auto-generate an AI-generated translation, and then they just do all the creative work to make it sound in voice for the character. Or you start with 50 auto-generated concepts, and then you pick the best ones, and then you layer on top of that the really unique stuff that you want to bring out for the unique concept of game that you're designing. And so I think, I don't think AI is going to like replace any jobs that any like full human is doing, but I think it's going to take a bunch of things humans are doing and accelerate them.
I like that really optimistic take on AI. Recently, I was thinking like, oh, why am I majoring in CS if like ChatGPT can write code better than I can? So that does make me feel a little better.
So here's the thing. Like I read this book a little while back. Oh gosh, what was it called? It was a book about the history of computing from I think it was like The Innovators.
By Walter Isaacson?
Yeah,
I love that book. Oh my god.
Yes, it's amazing, right? And it talks about the history of computing from like like the very first computation machines all the way until like Steve Jobs or whatever I think was about when it was written. And it showed over and over again, there were these forks in the road where you could envision a world where the computers were doing things on their own, or you could envision a world where the computers were a tool for humans. And every time the world where computers are a tool for humans was what bore out. Like early on computers, they didn't even know, like, should we build a screen and a keyboard, or should we just have the computer do all the code breaking on its own? And it turns out the screen and the keyboard is way better. And every step of the way, I think all of the AI stuff that we're seeing right now is just going to get like strapped to a pair of glasses and make us smarter humans rather than take any of the like fundamental things that we're doing and do them in isolation.
So true. The next Google Glass will finally work. Our next question comes from Abby. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm 16 from Los Angeles. I'm a junior. Sorry I can't have my camera on my Wi-Fi today. It's just been so bad. But my question is, what is your process of creating a game's narrative, and like, how do you approach building a compelling story for players?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't work directly on narrative, but I've definitely worked on enough games to talk about how I see the process typically going. Usually what it starts with is it starts with really interesting themes and really interesting characters. Like I think a lot of people initially think about narrative in terms of plot, like what happens, but a lot of times plot, I think, is the like least interesting part of a narrative. Like you need to make it work, but you're really sticking around because you were attracted to the world by the themes to begin with, and then you're really interested in the development of the characters. Like I think it was Neil Druckmann, the game director of like Last of Us and Uncharted, has said like he likes building games with simple stories and complex characters. And I think so typically what ends up happening, what I've seen is that when you're doing the early ideation and there's like so much you don't know yet about the project, and you know you've got like a couple of years to flesh it out, what you hone in on are a couple of these themes that you really like and that you really want to deliver on, and then some characters that you can start to visualize in your head, and then you just see how those play out of like what would these characters do in a world that would like tell a story of the sort of thematic style that I'm trying to tell, and you let that kind of evolve on its own almost.
Right, kind of like Polytopia and the tribes. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh no, same thing.
Oh, okay. Our next question comes from Kai.
Yeah, this time actually somewhat more of a serious question. What do you think about the Steam Deck and Linux gaming in general? And also, like, why doesn't Destiny 2 support the Steam Deck?
Yeah, so I think the Steam Deck is super interesting, and Linux gaming in general. The reason why we don't currently support it is just time. Like every expansion to each platform, to ensure we're hitting the quality of experience that we need, what we need to do in terms of platform support, streaming support, security support, we have to just kind of triage how many of those platforms can we expand to in a given year. But I'm personally really interested in the Steam Deck because I think it's more and more of the hardware device is almost becoming a commodity. Like you just kind of have the games that you want to play in your accounts that exist somewhere out in the cloud, and then you pick any device to enjoy it, from any varying size screen, from like something you can hold in your hand to some giant like multi-monitor or like home TV setup or whatever.
Yeah. I did notice that Destiny is extremely cross-platform. Like, did that require a lot of technical work to make it like all work really well cross-platform? Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's every one of the and you think at some point after you've done 3 or 4 or 5 platforms, it should be like easy to go to the next one. It never is. It's always a ton of work each time.
Yeah. So actually, like I said before, over the summer I was working on Signwriter, the game about love, math, and graphing. And this is more of like a team question, but how do you foster collaboration and communication with your development team and your design team and all that stuff? And I guess, like, what are some things you've learned from your experience on how to make sure that everyone's contributions are valued and utilize, and especially when there's teams that don't necessarily understand the work of the other team and vice versa.
Oh my gosh, Claire, you're speaking my language. This is actually at the like core of what I try to do for my job and just generally as a leader. I could talk about this for the next like hour, but I'll try to collapse it enough that we can have other questions. So I think a few things that are really important is like everybody needs to see everybody else as a like smart human trying to do the right thing. And that happens automatically when you're on small teams, but like eventually once you get to big enough teams, it's really easy to create like us versus them of those guys in that city over there or that building over there, like they always are just making my life difficult. And then like getting folks to be like, no, those guys are all just also really smart people trying to do the right thing. And let's understand each other's perspective, especially like different disciplines. It can happen where like an engineer is trying to do one thing and designer's trying to do a different thing, and they feel like they're at each other's throats, when in reality, both are just trying to solve the problem with a piece of the puzzle. So I found unconditional positive regard and really like thinking about everybody else as a three-dimensional person is really important. I think diversity of perspectives on a team is incredibly important when you're making something creative. Like it's really easy to collapse into groupthink that both limits what you do, like you just make a less interesting product. But then once you have that groupthink, anyone who's outside of it gets like repelled out of the group without you even realizing it. Because they're like, oh, well,
Right.
I'm the only person saying this thing against all five of you, so I'll just stop saying it. And then the third one, because I'll stop because I literally could talk about this for like an hour, is psychological safety. Like it's, so I spent a long while as an engineer where I would do like little bits of design, and then I eventually went fully into design. And once you're like fully responsible for creative decisions, like it's scary. It's scary to make a pitch for something, especially when it's not done yet. Like if you don't wait until it's perfect, because you can't, to work effectively, you have to give the bad pitches, the stuff that you just worked on for 30 minutes, but you go into a room and now you want to talk to people. And pitching ideas that are almost certainly not good yet, but are like exposing something about you and how you think is really intimidating. And then welcoming criticism and feedback so that idea can be upgraded is also hard, because you're like immediately getting like your idea torn apart. And
Yeah.
to do that really well, I think you need to create like incredible psychological safety where like it's fun and it is exciting to brainstorm and to give off the cuff ideas. And everybody's like a thing we talk about at Bungie a lot is we intentionally use the phrase yes and, like almost like you're doing improv, because
my school
what
does
you
that
want to
too.
do is reward what like the bravery that someone just showed by showing up with an idea, and then potentially add on to it, but not immediately smack them down, because that just erodes that psychological safety in them.
Those are some, I should really note down. That was really helpful. I think those are all three very great points. And I think your second one about like really treating someone, the first one about treating someone as a 3D person, I think that took a lot of work and you have to really work on that. But yes, I think Kara and I can relate on like really working on that. Oh, it seems like we have a question from Car or Carl.
Okay, so personally, I don't play Destiny, but I've had more than a couple of friends that have been playing Destiny, and they have told me the community is quite toxic. How do you feel about that?
I would not call our beloved Destiny community toxic personally. I think what we have is we have a really passionate community, and we have a bunch of the things that you see whenever you get a really passionate community. Like a thing I realized after working with a community this large and passionate was, and it was really helpful for my own like mental health when working on stuff, when not everything goes well, is that hating a game is not the opposite of loving a game. Hating a game is like 5 degrees off from loving a game. And the opposite of loving a game is not caring at all, like being completely ambivalent or apathetic. Like, and that's the battle you're actually fighting, is to get millions of people to go from being totally apathetic about what you're doing to being engaged, to being passionate. And then once they're really passionate, they're going to oscillate in this space between feeling really rewarded and really listened to and really happy, to feeling really frustrated and really like, why did you do this thing? And the more passionate they are, the more they'll like oscillate in that space. Because we have folks on like our Reddit community who will post like, they'll do like entire UI mockups of like, this is how the whole game should be designed, and like, this is what I should do. And some of them are like really good ideas. And it's like, oh, this is just a person who really, really cares about what they're playing and like how it feels. And they're not only spending a bunch of hours to play the game, but then spending a bunch of hours to think about and build a mock-up of what they wish the game could be. And then they're oscillating in that space of being really passionate about a thing that you built. And once I realized that, it was much easier for me to deal with the kind of highs and lows of an online community, because we had gotten people who weren't apathetic about the thing we had spent years working on.
That's really insightful. I've never really thought about it like that, about being apathetic, being the actual opposite of loving a game. But I am going to but bring to the memory of everybody that Bungie was one of the few companies that when Roe v. Wade was repealed, you did announce you were providing healthcare services. This is a service. This is something that should be provided by everyone. And some fans were a bit disappointed, let's put it. Do you think that company policy decisions change how a player might view a game?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think there's all sorts of things we can do as a company that change. We do stuff every week, every month that changes how people think about our game. But I think ultimately we're not going to make decisions like that based on what our players think. Like, we're going to make those decisions based on what we think is right.
Yeah.
Great,
on
thanks.
your point about the time commitment, I've seen people make like literally 100 character long tier lists of like injustice characters, which I really took to heart. But so like that's a really great point.
Yeah, like if someone makes 100 character long tier list, sorry for interrupting you, by the way.
Did you finish
totally
your thought?
Okay,
Yeah, that
sorry, I
was
was
my
excited. If people make like 100 character long injustice tier lists, and the whole point of their like 20-minute YouTube rant is about how the latest patch has completely broken the game, and these 3 characters are totally messed up, and these 3 characters are now like 4 levels below F tier, a new level that's never even been created for how bad they are. Like, that's someone who really loves your game, who's really invested and wants it to be really well balanced. And they're experiencing one of those ebbs in the ebb and flow.
Yeah, that's where I've like seen a lot of Reddit discourse. I'm like, no, clearly red arrow, like green arrows on top, or clearly whatever. Yeah, so that's a really good way of thinking about it. I never thought about it before. Yeah, we have a question from Chris Walker. Oh, you're muted, by the way.
Muted.
Oops, I forgot. Hello, my name is Chris. I am staff here at Hack Club, and I work on game dev things. And I had a different question, but now I'm really curious, actually, about kind of a different version of the same question that was just asked, which is like, how do you design a game so that you get like, rather than ending up with like a toxic community, you know, in the actual like play experience, you know, sometimes people have just really terrible experiences in chat, particularly women. I think like, you can't play a game and just not see this like all the time in online spaces. And like, how do you design for like, you can't do anything about the fact that you're going to have a lot of, audience that is like still growing up and learning, and you can't really change the fact that humans are sometimes terrible to each other. But how do you bake into the game protections against that, that kind of stuff, and like foster a space that is, I don't know, that everyone wants to be in?
Yeah, this is a huge question that I think as an industry we haven't fully figured out. I will say, like, if you're interested in reading more about this, like Riot has definitely been one of the studios at the forefront of this, like with League of Legends, where they have a lot of published research about work that they've done in this space to try to shift how toxicity manifests and how their player base operates. This is not a thing I'm an expert in, but I've been working in online games for a long time, and like I think about it as kind of 3 layers. There's like, at the most surface layer, there's how are you moderating your community? Like what are you tolerating? What are you banning? What are you just like executing some sort of punitive action for? What are you rewarding? And then there's systems that, like, the faster and more comprehensive those systems are, the better you can make your community. But then I think the next layer under that is what are your like incentive structures in the game? Because separate from like moderation of bad behavior, like what kind of behavior are you encouraging? Does your game encourage team play? Does it encourage people to find friends? Does it encourage people? Like, this is where stuff like a lot of mobile games will do different things about like what kind of chat you allow, which isn't even just moderation, but just like what types of communications do you allow between different players? And are you designing that with a mindset that is going to create a healthy community, but also like that is going to create a healthy community for any type of person? Because I think it's easy to create a mindset that can be healthy for certain types of people and then can be really unhealthy or dangerous for other communities if you're not thinking about them, or you don't have anyone on your team who can kind of represent that perspective. And then to me, the bottom layer, the hardest layer, is the actual kind of like genre and design of your game itself. Like I think there are games that foster themes and tones of community and support and like helping other people, and they tend to have healthier communities. And there are games that foster tones of more of a like hostile dog eat dog world where everyone's out for themselves, and then that gets reflected in the whole aspect of the community, even through the like selection bias of who signs up and says, I would love to play a game like that, you know?
Oh, that's a good point. Some people might be attracted to the whole.
Are there
Yeah,
any
go for it.
particularly interesting ways about how this kind of design, like I don't know, decisions that you guys have made in Destiny in particular, I think, for that online space, or you know, or in Halo?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't go like way too far into the weeds. Here's one. So in Destiny, we've got strikes and we've got raids. So strikes are 3-player. They're meant to be casual, like fun interactions with other players, but you have 3 other players on your team and you're playing through an encounter to defeat like a boss. Raids are longer form 6-player engagements that are meant to be like deep puzzle focused. You really have to like earn your success. A lot of different players have to like play different roles in precise ways. And so we treat those 2 activity modes very differently. For strikes, we try to make it so there's nothing you can do to hurt other players' progress. Like we'll take things out of like that were pretty fun, because we're like, hey, if someone does this wrong, it's going to make the other players in the strike get annoyed at them, and we don't want anyone to ever be annoyed at any of their teammates in a strike. And so we try to make that experience where it's just you're always a value add, so it can be really casual. You can match up with anyone. None of you could have voice on. For raids, we want the experience where if everybody isn't doing exactly the right thing, you could all fail. But then because of that, we don't have as many tools for you to match up with strangers. And we instead want to ensure that you're playing with people that have the same expectations, that all have voice chat enabled. And so we try to kind of like separate the goals of both of those types of activities so that you have different types of social experiences and both are healthy.
Oh,
Thank you so
wow.
much. Super interesting. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that response. Yeah. So I promise we'll get on to the second part of this AMA, but we just got 3 new questions. I'm so sorry. I don't want to make anyone miss their question. So Pranav, do you want to go for it and like just be mindful of the time?
Yeah. So I'm Pranav, a hat clubber from the greater Seattle area. One thing that I wanted to ask you about was I've been hearing a lot about like VR, AR, and a lot of people talking about that within gaming. I'm curious what your thoughts are about that and whether or not you think that the future of gaming is going to look like people playing it entirely on like on an Oculus or some other like VR headset, or like is it gonna look like how it does right now?
So my personal view here, and this goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier about the like history of computing and AI and the whether computers do a thing on their own or whether they're aiding us, is like, I think computer graphics embedded into the world that we live in has 1,000 times more potential than us entering a world completely built by a computer. And so I believe that like AR is going to transform the way we as humans do everything. Like I think it's less interesting at this stage as a gaming platform. Like I don't think the game uses are as obvious, but there's tons of other like just human computer interaction uses for AR that I think are going to be incredible and are going to change everything about how we think about computers and the internet and so on. To me, VR is more of a niche that I think is clearly carving out its space as a niche, and there's room for a bunch of these different spaces. But I don't think we're going to end up in the Ready Player One world where everybody's just like in like a back to tank, living in our VR simulation for 12 hours a day, because I think people want to be around other people and experience the like real world. And as soon as you put on a headset and it blocks out the rest of the people in the room with you, like that's a big barrier. Whereas when you put on a pair of glasses that lets you see the people around you, but then you're collecting Pokemon or whatever, that I think is a very different sort of barrier.
Pokemon Go. Right. So before we get on to the next few questions, I just wanted to like have time for us to like turn it on, I guess, turn this AMA on you. Do you have any questions for us as like students who really like programming and students who are really interested in game design and game development?
A bunch. I guess as a starting one. So I think at your age, you have a better view of what the future is going to look like than I do as an old. And so like, what do you see as the disruptive future of entertainment technology that you bet people that are 30 plus are like blind to right now?
Anyone can just unmute and speak if you want to. This is like open to everyone. I think personally for me, as someone who's very interested in like the development of technology as a way of enhancing our lives, but also necessarily thinking about the impacts and ethics of technology, I believe that there's a lot of potential for all these things that we've talked about. For example, the power of ChatGPT and AI and how it's already doing a lot of literally art and game art and stuff. And also the power of ChatGPT taking over for a lot of writing dialogue and writing things. And you said it wasn't necessarily like concept of taking over, but I think that there's a lot of potential for in the future that it can enhance the experience. I've had GPT write portions of my proposals in the past few weeks. Like, how much of it is going to change their way of life in a way that's not necessarily how we want it to be, I guess. And I'm worried about like the ethics of these AI where it's like racially biased and in a lot of like things that people don't really want to think about. Does anyone else want to answer? I don't think I really answered that.
Oh, I'm like personally interested in like blockchain and like how that's gonna affect gaming, because like I've seen these like stories of like you have these like scams, I guess, where you pay to play these games. But I was thinking like, what if you have these like pay to win games, but instead of you paying the developer, you're paying like the economy or something.
There's actually this game made by someone I was like learned a lot from, Dark Forest. I believe it's built on Ethereum, and I've never personally ever played it, but you just talked about blockchain. I was like, oh yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
Check it out.
I don't really know, but I guess like the rise of like things like Discord communities, I guess, could also fall under that category. It's not really exactly entertainment, but yeah, I'm very sleep deprived right now, so that's my contribution.
I think that other than blockchains, also genuinely decentralized platforms such as the Fediverse that we've all had to experience due to Twitter's downfall will also be quite disruptive for the entertainment industry, which I guess at this point has to include social media. And I feel that one too many millennials, I'll call them, they're not just millennials, they're everybody over the age of 30-ish and under the age of 14-ish, that just denies leaving their comfort space of a centralized platform.
I think
Those are awesome answers.
I think myself, I think indie games are definitely like becoming not like as a technology or anything, but I think that the divide between indie and AAA games is becoming less and less nowadays. I mean, like just the other day, Stray was nominated as a Game of the Year with likes of God of War and Elden Ring. And there's just a lot of opportunities for like me or you to make like a AAA game looking quality. And I think that maybe in the future there is going to be very little to no separation between what a game Microsoft makes and what a game like Joe from accounting makes.
Yes, I love indie games. Oh my gosh. Baba Is You is something that I think one of my friends played that I really enjoyed. Do you have another question for us, or do you want to?
Yeah, those answers were so good. I gotta have another one. Yeah, if so I definitely feel like teens, 20-somethings have always been at the forefront of like new genres of music, new fashion. If we think about this, video games the same way, like what are the most interesting new genres of video games that you all are really passionate about?
Ooh. Well, I really like indie games. I've been talking about Polytopia a lot in the Zoom call, so that's one game that I really appreciate. I also really like games just with pretty art and music, the things that people are, I think, growing to appreciate a lot. But that's just me.
I like open world MMORPGs, like kind of like sandbox, and like you can basically do whatever you want.
Oh, hackable games. Yes. Games where you can kind of see the code behind it are super cool.
Sprig.
Yeah, going off Claire's point, my favorite types of games are definitely like moddable games. Like I'm a big fan of Valve games and the Half-Life games, and the amount of like community games have just been developed off the base of Half-Life. Like there's this game me and my friends really like to play. It's a real-time strategy game called Lambda Wars, and it's basically just Half-Life, but as a real-time strategy game like Polytopia, in a way. And I think that's my favorite new genre of games is fan created like games based on other games.
I'll
My
just throw
favorite
out
new
something I
genre.
think is super interesting that I haven't, like a border that I haven't seen cross yet, but I think that will be, is just given the like massive breakout emergence of Twitch streaming and just changing the way that games are consumed as kind of like a third person experience. Now I think that like eventually those things are going to blend, and we're going to start see gaming experiences that like have really built into them this idea that like there is an interaction between an audience and a creator, and like that is the play of the game is like this gladiatorial arena thing as much as it is like this individual experience. But I haven't seen anything really compelling in that genre yet. Just kind of things where it's like, oh, like play a game with your favorite creators, which feels like a very first order version.
I think that games that like you play to teach you about other stuff is pretty fun. Like Claire and Chris are working on Sign Writer, which is like a math game, and I think it's like really cool. I think in the past these games have been a little bit like forced. Like it feels like they force the game into the thing to try and make it fun, but like nowadays a lot of the games, they just feel so natural and you don't even really realize you're learning. And I think those games are like gonna be super interesting and fun to play with.
Okay, I think we have like 9 minutes left. So I know that there are two people who had their hands raised. Thomas and Kai. Do you guys still want to ask those questions? Or
My
Thomas?
question is a bit more general, but like aside from Destiny 2, what else is Bungie working on? And like what technologies is Bungie looking to use? Like maybe in terms of game engines like Unreal Engine?
Promise to keep this
I
off the record
could
if you want to
say
share
we
anything.
have a bunch of stuff that that we are working on that is really exciting that we have not announced to anyone yet.
We could take the recording off. I'm joking. To go back to Tom, sorry. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, sure. So growing up, I always played Minecraft, and I really enjoyed playing that because I was able to like make my own game out of it, right? And I know that other people have mentioned the benefits of modding and servers and the creativity that some games can allow. But it seems since Minecraft has come out, there hasn't been a really significant game that has given users that same degree of control, right? I mean, for me, I've always thought, well, the next frontier might be virtual reality. But if not virtual reality, where do you think that like open world of creation where people can create whatever game they like, what form do you think that would take?
Yeah, like to me, I think the two leading contenders in that space right now are Minecraft, obviously, like you said, and Roblox. Like I think Roblox is super interesting, but Roblox is I think it chose tools that were significantly more complex to use, but then can create a broader array of experiences. I feel like there's been a bunch of other attempts in this space, but part of the like magic that I don't know exactly how to formulate, or else I'd be trying to make a Minecraft competitor right now, is you need that level of like easy socialization of like, because it's not enough for you to build a thing on your own. It then needs to like spread virally. And I feel like that's something that only, as far as I can tell, Minecraft and Roblox have done. And then there's a bunch of other game engines which have created experiences where you can build incredible things, but for whatever reason, they can't cause that viral spread.
That makes a lot of sense, I think. Right. I guess that makes Minecraft very, very unique in that way, and that's why it's been the top game for so long until Tetris beat it or something. So every AMA we have like the classic Zach problem, because he is currently, I believe, like a few thousand miles above the surface of Earth. Sam, take it away.
Oh, okay. This hat magically makes me Zach. Just pretend that. So say when you got on this call, you didn't actually get on a Google Meet or a Zoom, and suddenly you found yourself teleported back to the year 500 BC. You don't know how you got there, but that's all right. But suddenly you realize you're the dictator of the world. But there are 3 identical worlds in this year 500 BC. And you realize that in about 2,500 years from now, there's going to be a great war between these 3 Earths, and only one Earth is going to survive. And the question is, how, as a dictator of the Earth, well, what do you do as the dictator of your Earth in 500 BC to best increase your Earth's chance of survival? And you have some quick constraints. You die after the rest of your life, so you only have the rest of your life to put your plans in motion. And you can assume you speak the local language, and the war is inevitable, so you can't somehow find your way out of the war. The question is, what do you do as dictator in 500 BC to win this war, or set yourself up for victory?
Let's see, 500 BC. I'm trying to think about the state of humanity and technology at 500 BC. Honestly, I bet I would probably lose. I think I personally, as a human, I think the only world I want to build is one of cooperation and collaboration, and I believe where we are today in 2022, like that can consistently be the best way to do everything. I suspect the person who would win out of the three of us in 500 BC is whoever most rapidly and ruthlessly conquered and exploited as much of the human race as possible. And I think I would just opt out of that and my world would die.
Cool.
That's one of the most amazing answers ever. Because okay, no one has considered the fact that it's 500 BC. So like your first thought was like, what was the world at that time? That's a good point. Like, yes. But I also think sometimes that's a really good point. I think that's something that a lot of people who are working on longevity. Sorry.
Some games are not worth winning.
Put you on a t-shirt. Yes. Okay. I really appreciate that answer. Awesome. So now that it is 7:57, yes, we're getting a t-shirt with that. You can buy it at the Hack Club shop. Thank you so much for coming on the AMA with us. Does anyone have any final comments or anything to say before I kind of wrap this up? Okay, I'm a little scared, but go for it.
Thing,
No.
as Steve Jobs once said,
Oh, stop.
pineapple on pizza. Does it belong there or does it not?
I prefer my pizza to be spicy and savory, so I would not want pineapple on my pizza, but there's a bunch of people I respect who really like sweet added to their savory, and so I believe the option deserves to be there.
I'm just going to recommend you try it.
Yeah, I don't like, I like my savory. Well, I eat really spicy food, so I like it to be savory and spicy, and then leave a sweet thing at the end. I don't really like the sweet to be in the middle of my meal before I've moved on to dessert.
That's a very diplomatic answer. Wow, I appreciate that. Oh, I almost forgot. So at every AMA, we do something called, like, we have the speaker do a hog face, and we make it an emoji in the Slack. So would you be willing to take part in this tradition?
Sure. What is a pog face? What kind of face should I be making?
Oh, can someone else explain? I don't think I can do this justice. It pog face is like a pogger, like you won, like you're surprised, like it's like a comical face. It originates from like I think a few Twitch streamers.
How's this?
Awesome, perfect. Thank you. That's perfect. Cool. Anyways.
Okay, wait.
Thank you so
I also
much.
have one final question that I think everyone should leave with as homework.
Okay.
As the resident. Oh wait, am I frozen?
No, you're fine.
We can hear you.
I'm fine. Okay, all of you froze. All right. As a resident, as senior game dev person in the room right now, what is one life-changing GDC talk that everyone should go to the vault right now and watch?
Oh dang. This is actually a really hard question because I have my list, but a bunch of them are like deep in once you've worked on games for a long time. There was a talk. I'm gonna get the name wrong of the talk. So I could probably find it and throw it in the chat or something. But there was a talk about a father who made a game every year for Christmas, I think, for his kid. And he tracked that over something like 10 years of games that started with like, what's a game that you can make that is great for like a 2-year-old, that is fun, that's super simple, and then like over the years getting more and more complicated games. And it was a deeply profound talk for me because I feel like it gets to that like primal sense of like why do we play games in the first place? Why do we make games? Like, what is it that human brains respond to? Paired with like that question earlier of like games are a social good. They're about ways for you to express how you care for other people. And this was a person using their game design skills to show how much they cared for another person. That I still carry with me. I liked that talk a whole bunch. I can find the name and email to y'all.
I would love
to watch
that personally.
I'd love to watch that.
I can proudly say I have seen that talk, and I remember following that person on Twitter, but Twitter deleted my account.
Oh,
So
Elf.
I'll try my best. Hey, I'll try my best to find it. I think I have it somewhere in my emails, and I'll try to share it as well.
Yeah. All right. I'm so sorry. We've gone 2 minutes over. So, anyways, just wrap up before we stop recording. Thank you so much for coming to our AMA. That was one of the most fun AMAs I've ever had. I think I've learned so much. And so I think we can stop the recording now.